It's the Brad and John Show.
It is the Brad and John Show. This is the C block, the Charlie block. Today's date is February 7th. It is a Friday. I am Brad. That is John. John, good morning to you once again.
Good morning to you, Brad.
Even as I speak, I should have done this let me try this one more time. I'm trying to do my research on the Adam Schnelting thing I talked about. Hold on, let me see if this comes up real quick. Yes, State Bill 162. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
Okay, Senate Bill, excuse me, Senate Bill 162. The act specifies minimum penalties for operating a motor vehicle in a passing lane when not passing or overtaking another vehicle. The Highway Patrol shall instruct its members regarding this law and shall enforce it to reduce incident of violations. Department of Transportation shall place signs along major highways in the state specifying the minimum fines for the improper use of passing lanes. Once again, I think this was enacted. I think Adam Schnelting's in bed with the sign lobby, you know, the people that make all the signs. I think that's what.
Yeah, well, you hate both yard signs and traditional metal signs, which is why you were kicked off the MoDOT Commission many years ago, Brad.
Driver training programs offered in this area shall include information concerning legal use of passing lanes. And it's going, who is it? Eric Vanderweerd? Who's that? It lists that name. Amendments, no amendments found. This is section 302.025, okay? It was effective date. It was 1/23/25, second read. So just week before last is second read and referred to the Transportation Infrastructure and Public Safety Committee. So you know that Adam Schnelting, when he's driving from his mansion in St. Charles County, is probably doing 100 miles an hour on the left lane on I-70. And when he comes somebody across, gets into somebody who's doing 95, he's the guy flashing his lights and honking his horn, and you know what I'm saying? So,
yeah. Oh, totally him. And by the way, I love the fact that we now have, because some of your imaginary beefs from the past got stale because you realize they didn't exist. And it's what you call, this time of year, Brad, you call them green shoots. You have green shoots coming up of brand new imaginary beefs, and Adam Schnelting could be one. Now, the one part of your suggestion that I do agree with is that folks traveling west on I-70 should just slow down and take a look at the Brad and John Show advertisements on billboards,
right,
which were brought to us by Brad Hildebrand.
That's right. And they start up again next week. We didn't run them this week. They start up again next week. Okay. But, John, I've got one problem. The green shoot things is not going to work next week because all the Mexicans are protesting next week. So
that's right.
We won't have any.
It's not going to be, there's a and actually, did you hear that next week John Deere is changing their name to Juan Deere? In solidarity with the Mexicans.
Okay, the Brad story from 9/11, okay? The Postal Service moves a lot of packages and a lot of mail on scheduled airlines. It goes into the baggage compartment just like your luggage and stuff like that. And maybe you know why things get lost in the mail, because your bags get lost in the airport system.
Yes.
So does the mails, okay? So back in 9/11, there was a problem the Postal Service had, that when everything got shut down, when we didn't fly any planes, and then even as we got back in the air, there were limited number of flights, the Postal Service was in a pickle. The guy that at 5 Star Auto would love that. It's a pickle, only a pickle. Anyway, you don't know that ad, do you? I'm so and so, and it only takes a nickel to eat a pickle. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, I do know that ad, but the only place I would go to is West County Auto Body.
Okay. Well, this is a used car place. Okay. So the federal government authorized the United States Postal Service to form an alliance with Federal Express because the Federal Express planes were still flying. Because even though everything else was for the most part grounded, the FedEx planes were still flying. So the Postal Service started using FedEx for transporting their packages and their mail. And there was a trade-off. And this is how I found out about this. At almost every post office in the country, Federal Express said, okay, Postal Service, you're going to pay us for this, but we want one extra little item that you may not approve of. And you know what that was?
What was it?
Every post office had a FedEx drop box installed in front of the post office.
Is that how that came to be?
Yes, that is exactly how that came to be.
I had no idea.
Yes, that's how that came to be. And you remember that when there was, because the first time I saw that, I thought to myself, why is there a FedEx drop-off box at the post office? Because the Postal Service offers his next day of stuff as well, too. So does FedEx. Why would they go to, and that was the deal. And it was like a, 5 or 10 year contract. They're all gone now, but that was the deal. You remember that? The FedEx boxes were at the post office.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and think about if you worked for FedEx and at the end of the year when you're in the review with your boss or the board of directors or whatever, and you're like, oh, by the way, don't know if you've happened to see in our company drop boxes at every frickin' post office.
That would have been your take.
I would have been bragging about it. Yeah, are you kidding me? What a great negotiation.
Once again, feathering somebody's cap. I mean, somebody negotiated that deal because of the fact that would be like McDonald's, putting a Wendy's, oh, if you want a Frosty, well, pull up to the next window, you'll get your Wendy's Frosty right here at McDonald's.
It's pretty great.
It would never happen. Okay. Man, I'm on a roll this morning, aren't I?
You are on a roll, Brad. It's time to go solo. That's what Vanilla Ice said. Shout out to Shelly Barr.
No, I don't. John, I've told you. Like I told Shelly, John, if you quit this show, I quit this show. I'm not doing this solo anymore. I hate being on the air by myself. I've done it for I don't know how many years. Never want to do it again. Okay, last thing. It was on the top of our newscasts. And here we go again with this government bureaucracy stuff. I watch a lot of these guys. I'm a frustrated pilot. Once upon a time, I was a helicopter pilot. Haven't flown in years. Matter of fact, the last time I was in a helicopter was back in, I think, March of 2020 when I rode along with the St. Louis City, St. Louis County Police operations, which was a lot of fun. Okay. There is a battle going on, and it goes on all the time, between the FAA and the NTSB. And the interesting part of this is that the NTSB does, I don't know how they do this. When there's a plane crash, they come up with, you would not believe how thorough they are. They typically, like this latest plane crash with the helicopter, so sad, all that wreckage goes into, they rent a warehouse someplace, and they literally try to reconstruct the planes, and in this case, the plane and the helicopter, as much as possible. And they go through all the things. Okay, what was the position of the flaps on the airplane during this? Where was the yoke? All that kind of stuff. And a lot of that stuff is in the flight data recorder. But the interesting thing about it is the NTSB typically comes out with recommendations, a lot of them sometimes involving the FAA, saying this might have been averted if the FAA used different procedures. And you know what the FAA does?
What do they do? They spend their time arguing with it?
No, they say, hey, thanks, but we're the FAA or the NTSB. You don't know what you're talking about. And I'm exaggerating that. But in other words, they essentially say, okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it. But we're doing our own thing. If you heard the news this morning, two things came out. And Sean Duffy, who's the new Department of Transportation, I'm telling you, this guy's got a tough job. How in the world he is going to be better than Pete Buttigieg at the Department of Transportation?
Yeah.
I have no idea how this is going to be possible. But one of the things he said is they're going to take a look at the retirement age. I've talked about this numerous times. Mandatory retirement age for an air traffic controller is 56. Now, we had this situation with the airline traffic, what they call the ATPs, the airline transport pilots, the guys who fly the big jets, the 737s, the guys who were on Southwest United and stuff like that. It used to be, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I think the mandatory retirement age used to be 60, and I think they bumped it up to 62, and I'm not 100% sure of that. But once again, I know people who are 56 who could run marathons. I know people who are 56 who can't get themselves off the bar stool, at closing time. Get what I'm saying,
Yeah.
John?
I get I know 89-year-old guys who have enough digital literacy to get an $800,000 contract from St. Louis Development Corp.
So age to me is I've said this now that I'm I'm way past my 40th birthday. I'm at 89. That was 49 years ago. Okay. To me, there's a demarcation point in life, and I say it's when you hit 40. Some people after 40, they just go all to hell. Let's be honest. They go all to hell. And some people catch their stride at 40. And it's like the Dr. Oz thing. If you know the crazy thing, do you know, I think I told this story before. Do you know the how Dr. Oz ended up on Oprah's show?
I don't think so. I don't think you've told that before, Brad.
Okay. Once again, another story that John's going to say. No,
I really haven't heard it before, I don't think. I would remember it, I think.
Dr. Oz had this thing called real age. And he wasn't the first guy that did this. There was a group of researchers, a bunch of doctors and psychiatrists and things like that did this research originally, and he got into it. And essentially, the real age, I think he trademarked that term, real age. And by the way, did you know this crazy story about Three-peat? I'll throw this out. Three-peat, do you know this crazy story?
You mean Pete and Repeat were sitting on a log, or does this have to do with the Kansas City Chiefs?
Yeah, the term three-peat is trademarked. Do you know this crazy weird story?
No, I don't. By whom?
Well, I'll tell you that in a minute. Okay, first off, let me go back to Dr. Oz. So the Dr. Oz thing came that essentially, and he sort of said the same thing. Once you get past 40, there are some people that, like, let's say you got two 50-year-old guys standing side by side. One guy's got a big old beer gut, and, he's in bad shape, and he's huffing and puffing, and he's got emphysema, and he's on oxygen. And the other 50-year-old guy is a marathon runner, and he plays, on the weekend, he plays, pickup basketball games with the teenagers and stuff like that, and he holds his own, okay? The real age thing came about the fact that there's a chronological age and there's a what he would call his physical or his real age. And you're not going to laugh when I tell you this part of the story. The thing that caught Oprah's attention was one of the chapters in Dr. Oz's books where he discusses habits of people who look much younger than they actually are has to do with 200 orgasms per year. In both men and women, this is a true story, I'm not kidding about this. In both men and women who have more than 200 orgasms per year, typically you look much younger than their physical age, and men and women who have less than 200 orgasms per year, look older than their physical age.
Wow. I mean, wouldn't you quibble with some of the scientific? Because here's the thing. I don't mean to step on this. Because I understand that logic. I'm sure it would have to do with, your blood flow and your heart rate. But wouldn't it pre-select for people who tend to be more attractive? Because if you're some giant schlub, like eating ice cream every day with a giant beer gut, you're probably less likely to have a woman or women at your disposal, don't you think?
Well, you
could take it into your own hands, I guess, is the other point too.
Up until recently, let me put it to you this way. Up until the early days of my radio career, I would have somewhat agreed with that, but then I met Larry Mondello. And have I ever told the Larry Mondello story?
Yeah, you've told it a few times. Yeah, and I'm a big fan of it because it underscores the idea of the hot girls generally don't get approached.
Right.
And so, I mean, what is it? Fate favors the bold.
Right. The Larry Mondello story is a guy you work with who was a disc jockey who was not the smartest guy, certainly not an attractive guy, overweight guy. At the time, he was in his late 20s when I worked with him, smoked a lot, had a sort of a wheeze to his voice, was once again, not a very smart guy, but he came to station events with incredibly beautiful women. I mean, women who were could have been swimsuit models, could have been in Playboy magazine. And one night we ended up, myself and Jeff Andrew, who was a very attractive looking Jewish guy who looked more like, what's the guy name Omar Sharif, if you know who Omar Sharif was. You know what I'm talking about? The guy, isn't that his name? The guy who was in Funny Girl with Barbra Streisand.
Okay. Before my time.
Right. Okay.
But I'll take your word for it.
Good looking Arab guy. Okay. And Jeff, we're sitting at dinner, and Jeff says to Larry Mondello, Larry, how is it that you are always out with these gorgeous women? And Larry says, hey, it's a numbers game. And Jeff and I looked at each other and said, a numbers game? And he says, yeah. He says, if I go to a party or I go to a bar or something like that, he says, I walk the room, I look at every woman there, and I check out her hand, see if she's got an engagement ring, a marriage ring. So the ones that look like they're available, I rate them. Most beautiful woman in that room is number 1. Then there's number 2. There's number 3. I go right after number 1. And Jeff and I are going yeah, right. There's no way this is the way it does it. And he tells the story about 9 times out of 10, he gets somewhere with number 1, gets their phone number, gets a date, the whole bit, and rarely does he come to number 2. He can't even remember the last time he ended up with number 3, okay? And he said that once he got to know these women, the women would talk about the fact that no man would approach them because they were afraid of getting shut down. So in other words,
because they're afraid that the men are afraid that the women are out of their league and men cannot handle rejection.
Right. Oh, God, she's so beautiful. She wouldn't give me the time of day. So I've learned that lesson. Okay, finishing up the story. Pat Riley, the NBA coach, has a trademark on the word three-peat. Do you know this story?
No way. I'm sure that I know we're up against time here, and I got to go at 8.
Yes.
But so he was former coach of both the Lakers and the Knicks, and I think he coached some other teams as well.
And
so is this from the Lakers era?
I don't know. It's this company he owns, and he's trying to cut a deal with the Chiefs to officially license them to use his term three-peat because he owns the trademark on it. And he owns the trademark for three-peat. If you know trademark law, there's different categories of trademark law. There can be multiple trademarks. Like, for example, I learned this from my trademark attorney. I used to have one back in the day. And she told me, like, for example, there's a Big Mac sandwich at McDonald's, and there's a Big Mac set of overalls, and you have categories. There's categories you can trademark things.
I see. I get it.
You don't have a universal trademark. There are categories of the trademark. And apparently, so the category that Pat Riley has to do with athletic teams. So essentially, it's the same crazy thing was we can't legally on an ad, if there's a party that a bar is having for Sunday, we can't legally say, hey, come to the bar, and this weekend it's the Super Bowl
be the
party.
Big game.
See, now the interesting thing, boy, that is.
And I got to go here in a second, Brad. But yeah, and you put that on before the BJ Show blog. You had that on the other day because we can't say the Super Bowl. We got to say the Super Bowl. If we were advertising, we'd have to say the big game.
Now, if I were the NFL, I would trademark the term big game as well too. But that's
I would too.
And then you'd screw them. Okay,
hey, I'll see you at the big game party, Brad.
Say goodbye, John.
See you guys on Monday.